Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. This is the purpose-driven, mission-led marketing, why purpose is paramount to building trust today. And I'm joined by Laurel Mintz of Elevate My Brand, Leela Srinivasan, the Chief Marketing Officer of SurveyMonkey, Lisa Roberts, the Chief Marketing Officer of Yonder, and Barbara Shipley, the SVP of Brand Integration at Aarp. How are we all, everyone?
So great. Thanks for
Doing
having us.
great.
Great.
Of course. We're really excited to get started. Now, this webinar is asking the questions, what does your brand stand for? Why does it live its mission and values? And how does your brand purpose provide the differentiation your consumers will not only purchase, but also champion? So I'm going to hand it over to Laurel Mintz. We're very excited to have you on board and to be sharing your insights. And I know that you've been in, on the speaker circuit and been in a lot of webinars and working with teams that are really struggling at this point.
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I am Laurel Mintz. I am the CEO and founder of Elevate My Brand, which is a digital and experiential marketing agency located here in Los Angeles. We work with brands large and small, baby startups, just like some of you on the call, I'm sure, all the way up to huge brands like Facebook, Verizon Digital Media, Zendesk, Sprinkler. So we know this world from the start to the finish, and I'm so excited to have this incredible panel on board today. But before I make their introductions, I want to make sure that you guys know that you can chat us in the feature on the bottom here. There is also a QA feature. And one of the things that I love to do is make sure that we're integrating this as a conversation. So please, there's a lot of you on the call, ask the questions that you want answers to. We are all experts here. We want to make sure this is about you and that you're getting what you need out of this conversation. So please engage, ask questions. I'll make sure that I integrate them. And with that, I'm going to ask my amazing panel of women to make introductions. So Leela, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Leela Srinivasan, I'm the CMO at SurveyMonkey. I've been at the organization for about 2.5 years now. Really excited about this conversation. I have probably been in marketing for about 10 years. Prior to that, I worked in management consulting at Bain. I worked in sales before that, so I've worn a lot of different hats. But the topic of mission, vision, values, purpose is really what energizes me. So again, I'm really glad to be here this morning.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to pass it next to Lisa.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Lisa Roberts, I'm the CMO at Yonder. We're a SaaS AI machine learning business in the B2B space. We are an authentic internet company. My background is started in one of the first online-only digital media agencies ever in the world. Helped build some of the very first word-of-mouth technologies in the world, and worked with some of the first pure play e-commerce businesses. So lots of tech and lots of use of data to try to figure out how you change the way things work. So glad to be here today.
Thank you for that. And thank you for sponsoring this event today. And finally, last but certainly not least, Barbara Shipley with AARP.
Well, good morning. I'm Barbara Shipley. I serve as AARP's Chief Brand Officer in that role. AARP, for those of you, if there's overseas folks, you may not be all that familiar with AARP. We are a 60-plus-year-old organization that advocates on behalf of people over 50. Very timely right now. And for me, my background is mostly agencies. I have been all on the agency side until about 15 years ago when I decided I really wanted to work for a truly purpose-driven organization, and came to the nonprofit social mission AARP and have loved every minute of it.
Fantastic. So we're going to launch a poll because we want to get the temperature of those on this call. So Jasmine, if you could just launch that, and if everyone could answer, we're going to get the response to this, share with you so that we can continue the conversation. So that should have popped up. If everyone could answer, including the ladies on the call, I would love to hear your response to that. Oh, sorry, hosts and panelists can't vote. Never mind, ladies. We have to answer questions, not the poll. Apologies. But if you guys could all answer that quick poll, we'll pop up the answers as soon as we've got your responses. And in the meantime, we have so many amazing people that are tuning in. Aziz, welcome from Malaysia. Fantastic to have you. Continue, please, popping in questions. And with that, I am going to kick it off. So the most baseline question here, of course, is what does purpose-driven marketing mean, mission-driven marketing mean to you? And I think I will start with Barbara, because your organization was a foundational, that was part of your foundational mission. So if you could speak to the why behind your organization, that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And we channel our founder at AARP every day. We were founded by a retired educator over 60 years ago. And so we, Ethel Percy Andrus, we constantly think, what would Ethel do? How would Ethel approach this? She was an amazing woman who actually found a retired teacher living in an abandoned chicken coop because she couldn't afford anything else. She had no safety net, no pension, no health care. And what's interesting about that moment is Ethel really got mobilized when she discovered that people were living like this without these safety nets. And the great thing is she got mobilized, she got angry, she was a feisty retired educator, and she really changed the world. And a lot of people don't really know that. And so part of our mission is to help people understand what it is we do and how we help them live their best life in this second part of their life. And there's a lot to that. There's an advocacy component, and we're probably the best at advocacy. There's information that people trust. There's programs. And with 110 million people in this country alone, over 50, there has never been a more important time for an organization like ours to bring our purpose, which is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. And the wealth and breadth and depth of what we do really is almost endless.
I love that. I feel like that's just the mic drop moment right there. I mean, you have led your entire organization with that mission-driven, purpose-driven marketing. So thank you for that. I also love the Yonder homepage, which basically says that you give a damn about the internet, which has to mean that you are purpose and mission-driven. Can you speak to that a little bit, Lisa?
Oh, for sure, for sure. We are purpose and mission driven, and more than anything, we try to help make sure that our purpose and mission driven customers can do that best and make sure that connects best with their customers or who they want to be their customers. The reason why we say we give a damn about the internet, sorry for the crude language, we could have chosen worse, but we really mean it. We believe that the internet can be a very, very amazing place, that it is an amazing place. It kind of just doesn't work the way that it used to, or the way that people used to think that it worked. It's kind of getting harder to understand. It's harder, I think, to discern what you should care about and what you should trust, both as a brand as well as a consumer, a constituent, just an everyday person. So our work is about, helping businesses find more ways to understand how narratives are developing online and how that's aligned with their brand and their brand purpose, and make sure they have the opportunity to be involved in those narratives, or sometimes to actually do something about those narratives to make sure that purpose that they care so much about is being portrayed in the right way, it's being protected, and it's connecting with the right people. In the end, we're just trying to create a more authentic internet, which is brands and people with more authentic connections to one another, people with more authentic connections with other people, and that's the purpose that we have as a company.
So fantastic. And speaking of connections, I feel like SurveyMonkey is the glue that holds us all together. One of the things I always talk about with our clients is to ask their audience, to reflect back the brand to them. And that is really what SurveyMonkey allows us as marketers to do. So can you speak a little bit to how SurveyMonkey is facilitating these really challenging conversations right now?
Yeah, I can. Thank you for saying that, Laurel. So, and I was going to start by answering your question on mission and purpose, but I think we're very we're proud to be the technology that I think underpins a lot of these conversations, because it does start by understanding and gathering feedback from your constituents, whether it's customers, employees, shareholders, students, patients, And I think if we've learned anything this year, it's about the incredible power and importance of listening to your stakeholders as you formulate your sense of direction. But on your discussion around mission-driven versus purpose-driven, I think of those as two slightly different things. And I come from a school of thought that really, I think of Jeff Weiner at LinkedIn, where I spent 4.5 years, and there we would distinguish between sort of mission and vision as being two slightly different things. So I think of the mission as what we do today. SurveyMonkey's mission, our tagline is "We power the curious," but if you think about what our mission is, we enable organizations to turn feedback into action. And so a lot of our marketing campaigns do focus on just the nuts and bolts of how we add value in that very very matter-of-fact way. That's what we enable businesses to do day in, day out. But when I think about our defining marketing campaigns, I think where you see the power happen is when we tap into our purpose, our why, which I relate more to our vision. And our vision is to raise the bar for human experiences by amplifying individual voices. So it's a different level of conversation around why what we do is so important. And again, this notion of amplifying individual voices in a year where we've seen various populations make it very clear that they haven't had a voice has just become really central to the way we think about the impact of our software.
I couldn't have said that better. It really is about listening. That is so foundational to the work that we all do. So thank you for that. And as a response to that, why don't we throw up the response to the poll so that we can listen to our audience and understand how they feel about this conversation. So can we throw that up? Fantastic. So the question was, when it comes to purpose-driven marketing, which of these statements are true for your brand? Select all that apply. And we had a 71% response from the audience that said, brand purpose and values play a part in our marketing strategy now. So that is fantastic. We also got a really high number on that companies are planning to leverage purpose-driven marketing in their future marketing efforts. So it seems as though those that are showing up on this conversation, and thank you for all of your feedback, it is either critical to your existing marketing strategy and or something that you are thinking very deeply on for the future of your brand. And that's why we are all showing up today. So thank you for that poll. Thank you for your responses. And we've got a couple questions from the audience. Joe Reddix asks, my question is related to distance branding strategies. How would you leverage your branding strategy in this remote environment because of COVID-19? So can you, and anyone can call this one out to speak to distance branding.
Well, I'd love to jump
Go ahead,
in
Barbara.
if you don't mind, because I think one of the interesting things about our brand, our mission, and the people that we serve is early on, it became abundantly clear that the older population was much more vulnerable to COVID, and it became very real. First, it became very real health issues, and then quickly after that, the health issues were joined by very real financial issues. And so for a brand like AARP, what we had to do, because we are so grounded in our purpose and understand so clearly who we are, what we do, and how we deliver for people, we had to pivot very quickly. We had to suppress some things that we do. You know, a lot of our members and people over 50 really like to travel. Well, travel wasn't really possible. So we had to quickly start to suppress some things and elevate, turn the volume up immediately. The trusted information people needed. They didn't know where to go to get the information that they needed. They were scared. And when people are motivated a bit by fear, they need to turn to somebody that they trust. So that trust that we have built up in our brand for 50 or 60 years became one of the most important things we had in terms of how we engaged and helped and served the, again, over 100 million people that we are here to serve every single day. And I would just say that one of the most amazing things is how it affected our staff. Everybody so quickly got utterly grounded around the same focused priority. And I'll be honest with you, that doesn't always happen because we are a complex organization. So, you know, walking the walk became second nature to us. It usually is, but in this time of COVID, it became so important. So the question specifically around distance is recognizing that people couldn't leave their homes, whether they wanted to or not. And so we had to find new ways to reach folks with this important message, this important information, and tips that, in all honesty, became sort of like life and death for this audience.
Yes, and you guys really did leverage this opportunity to step in and be leaders in that space for that very challenged demographic. Just a follow-up question on that for you specifically, because I know I have an aging mother and the internet has been kind of an amorphous concept to her. How did you guys overcome that as a concern for that aging population?
Well, it is true that I think one of the interesting parts about the truth behind the data is people are more internet savvy than maybe in many cases we give them credit for. But that said, Lisa, I turn to you, and what your mission is with Yonder is to make the internet make sense for people. So I think for us, it was about leveraging all the available channels. And I will say, for some people, Laurel, maybe like your mom, the telephone became just as important as anything else. And so to make sure that we were using all the channels, we would hold, for instance, teletown halls, and people could register and call in, use that old-fashioned telephone, and get access to the experts they wanted to hear from, the information they needed to get, the actionable tips that they were looking for, whether it was Facebook, whether it was the web, whether it was the telephone, whether it was door hangers that ended up going on people's front doors because we worked in partnership with local public health officials. It was everything. And while I know that the technology is the game changer now, it's also important to remember that people are getting information in all different ways. And for a brand like ours, we have to really leverage everything we have.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Joe, for that question. Guys, keep the questions coming. This is an incredible panel, and I want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of this. So the next question that we discussed in our kind of pre-panel conversations was about brands and their roles evolving because customers or consumers are really forcing us to pay attention to what they want. I think Leela and Lisa, you're both very well suited to just talk a little bit about how your companies really showed up in that conversation. And Lisa, I'd like to start with you. How do your consumers really shape those conversations for your brand?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this question is apropos given what Barbara was just talking about. If you take a step back, AARP, along with so many other brands out there, had to reevaluate what is the role that I need to play in the, not just in sort of the purchase and sales cycle with my customers, but what is the role that I need to play in my customers' lives? And I think as we've seen, gosh, so many things have happened in the past 6 months. I think brands have had to look at themselves from so many different, vantage points. I think with the pandemic, initially it was, gosh, how do we just make everybody feel like they're going to be okay? And that's when you saw the sort of, we're all in this together kind of messaging. And then I think very quickly after that, brands, and exactly what Barbara's saying, AARP had to do, had to think, okay, what are sort of the necessities of how I need to serve my customers differently, and then what am I hearing from them? And the way that we talk about listening is that's a great start, but you have to go to understanding. If you're just listening to words that are being said online, or you're just looking at words that are trending, that you're not understanding the context of those words, you're not getting what people actually really need and what they feel right now. And so I think it became about listening to what they need. And that's where you became exactly what Barbara is saying. Marketing became, how do I give the best information to my customers? How do I inform them to understand how they can buy from me? How, if I am a physical, if I do have brick and mortar, how do they engage with our storefront? How do they get what they need from our store? And then how I think consumers did turn to brands to be a source of truth, especially, as the brand relates not just to what they do and the products that they provide, but also the purposes that they are a part of. and that they have been passionately aligned with for many years. And now I think we are starting to transition into, especially with, you sort of overlay a social justice movement on top of a pandemic. I think we're now seeing more customers say, I actually want to know where you stand on these things. And sometimes they've been forced to express that. You know, if you think about the pandemic, you know, bless any brand that has had no choice but to respond to face mask policies.
Right.
And having to decide whether to put that sign that says you have to wear a mask on my door or choose to not. I mean, it's a really hard decision. And as marketers, I think a lot of businesses haven't been in that place thus far. And I think you just really have to have a very keen touch on where your customers' mindsets are and where their values lie when you're making decisions like that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in the pre-calls about how even the mask conversation was so politicized, but really to your point earlier, it's about not just hearing the words, but really listening to the sentiment and the needs behind it. And that start with why conversation, we all really have inherently in our marketing backgrounds understood, but it has become more relevant now than ever before. And I think Leela, SurveyMonkey has done a fantastic job of, again, providing the platform for us to understand the why. So can you speak a little bit to that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And for us, I fully agree with everything Lisa just said. And then moving from that understanding into action, like what are you going to do about it? Which I think is this
exactly
next
right.
frontier that you know, we're hearing loud and clear from consumers that they need to see action. It's not, you know, words are one thing, but actually moving to action is the next. So I mean, I'd like to think we've always been customer centric and consumer centric and listening and understanding. But I think while that is certainly true, we've all gone into hyperdrive on that front in 2020, given everything that the world has thrown at us. And I remember even from the early days of shelter in place and COVID impacting us all, I found that the marketing—
I love early days.
Yes,
Yeah,
back,
right.
you know, back in the midst of time.
Now we're all
Back in the
traumatized.
day.
We're sitting on our computers like
Do you
this.
remember when we went home in March and we wondered if it would be for a couple of weeks? We just announced that we're strongly encouraging employees to stay home through July of next year. So this is our new reality, right? But in those early days, I was comparing notes with a lot of CMOs who were, you know, having to pivot, to use Barbara's word from earlier, and really adjust what they were doing. And the common thread through all of those conversations was we realized that this was the moment where if we hadn't been doing it before, we really needed to shift from selling to helping and to really understanding the value that our customers needed. And so, you know, we were listening across, you know, not only, you know, surveying, but just even listening to what customers needed from us. And that led us to develop a very different set of templates and tools that other organizations could use. So I remember we downed tools on a bunch of things back in March, April to spin up a page of resources, coronavirus resources, to help organizations figure out how to stay in touch with their employees as they all en masse migrated to work from home for the first time in the company's history, how they continue to check in with their employees, how they thought about monitoring healthcare symptoms. I mean, we've been working with the Department of Health in Rhode Island and in sending out SMS messages to their constituents so they can understand how the virus is you know, taking shape across the state. So just seeing these different use cases suddenly become really, really important for the customers that we serve, and being able to be agile in adjusting our services and our solutions and the way we help our customers to turn that feedback into action, because the game has just changed over and over again this year. So that's one piece. The second thing I'll say is, yeah, absolutely leaning into consumer sentiment and understanding what your customers need. But for us, customer number one remains the employee. And I think especially in the second wave around racial justice and that conversation, that forced us to look really, take a long, hard look internally and make sure that we can, you know, we deliver on our commitments. We've always, you know, had diversity, equity, and inclusion at the heart of our company. But again, our employee voices have risen up in this time to help guide our actions. And I think that has impact both internally and then externally in terms of how we show up.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone would agree that this has accelerated by necessity those conversations. So I think seeing it at companies at your levels really kind of satisfies the need and the conversation that the regular consumer is having currently. So thank you so much for that. And we have some really great questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to start integrating those a little bit. Christina C asks, what, if any, specific roles or departments responsible for purpose or social impact are you seeing now in place within organizations or companies? So I think the question is, are there new groups within your companies, or were there historical organizational teams within your companies that were addressing these issues? If anyone would like to take that.
Yeah, I can start. So at SurveyMonkey, we've had employee resource groups in place for a while, if we take the racial justice or social justice piece to begin with. And so we had a network of employee resource groups that were in existence. With the advent, following the killing of George Floyd and all of the conversation that's ensued since then, we spun up a new group, which is what we call our Racial Justice Task Force, which includes members of some of our employee resource groups, but also layers in members of our executive team. And we meet weekly, and we have an agenda, and we are systematically moving through the things that we can do internally as an organization, and then also the things we can do more broadly speaking in our community to empower companies to have the right conversations with their employees and their customers and their vendors even. So that's, you know, we felt that the need around racial justice specifically to put different mechanisms in place so that we could rise to the challenge.
I love that. And I love that you have the internal group, and then more importantly, you're applying that externally to the community at large. And I think that is such an important and valuable point to be made. It just can't be an internal conversation. It has to be, and now what? So I love that, Leela. Thank you. Lisa, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
And yeah, I think also, you know, I think there are new roles that will rise out of this, but I think also there's a mandate for the marketing organization as a whole to just think differently. I also think, you know, one of the main things we help a number of our customers with is understanding how the actions, perspectives, kind of external persona of their leadership reflects on their brand, because people obviously are more savvy than ever right now. And Leela, what you said, like, this is about having action back up your words. It's not just the action of the business, it's also the action of the leadership, the board members, the amount of sort of praise as well as sort of angst coming at brands that we witness that's based on not even current leadership, but maybe even past leadership, and how they're involved, not involved with different causes, things going on in the world, or what they have to say about it, also is reflecting on the brand. So, you know, I think this is about marketing thinking about purpose, and how does purpose connect to the things we say, and then, you know, does marketing now start to turn into actioning and activism that aligns with that purpose, versus great catchy campaigns and, you know, the next slashing of prices and how are we going to splash that as far as we can. I think we're really seeing that role shift, and it's so exciting and it's so fun.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's also scary for a lot of brands. I think to your point, it has to be a top down and also bottom up conversation. It can't just be one group within an organization. And one of the things that we also had talked about was cancel culture, and about how that is striking fear into so many of the C-suite within these larger organizations, because frankly, now they have to show up and be accountable. So I guess my question on that is cancel culture a good thing, or is it creating more angst, more fear, where people are not standing up and standing for something? They're being a little vanilla in their approach to this, and are they able to get away with that? It's a big question, I know.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to jump in.
Go
and
for it, Barbara.
Leela, Lisa, I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, because, you know, you mentioned, Lisa, does marketing become sort of like activism? And again, because of the brand where I work at our heart, we are about activism, we are about social change. But people also want actual value. You know, they want tangible value in their lives as well. So for a very complex brand, and you talk about the cancel culture, I think one of the things that maybe the blinding flash of the obvious, but it's something that we all probably think about on a regular basis, is how fine-tuned the dials are for the consumers, the kinds of things they're looking for. You know, it could be differences that are a hair's width of difference. The good news, I think, is, from my standpoint personally, is to the point that was made before, it has gotten beyond a catchy slogan or even just using a celebrity, although that has always been, that's an interesting part of this conversation too, is to spotlight some of the celebrities who have put themselves out there and their personal brands out there. I think it has changed the conversation in the board level and the executive level in terms of how we manage risk and what the timeline is. You know, it's almost as if something goes out there, and if in this culture that we have, it's going to either erupt or be accepted in minutes. And so it's affecting timelines, it's affecting how we allocate investments and resources, how we respond to things. You know, Laurel, I'm sure you deal with this all the time, because is the concept of the news cycle even relevant anymore? What is that cycle? And so I think that it is where we lean on the expertise that we have, the culture we've created, the communications, the respect for different opinions, which gets to Leela's point before about diversity and inclusion, where you're going to survive. And it depends on how long. Are we surviving a day, a week, a month? What is this? And how do we rethink our assessment of risk? I think the most important thing, though, and then I'll turn it back over, is it is about risk, but it is also about living your values and recognizing that as long as we know we're living our values, there are going to be some people that have a problem with what we've done or what we've said, but we never have to question why we made a move, what decision we made, and are we being authentically committed to who we are and what we stand for. Those are very tough decisions, though. I don't think there's anything very easy about what we're all faced with on a pretty regular basis right now.
Yeah, Barbara, what you said on...
No, you go, Leela.
Sorry, what you said on values resonated very strongly. So hindsight, of course, is everything. I feel very fortunate that we went through the exercise of not only defining our mission and vision earlier in the year, but also refreshing our values. I rolled those out on March 4th at our Troop Town Hall, as we call our all hands. And then, of course, the world changed. And one of the values that we added after a lot of discussion with our employee resource groups was the value stand for equality, by which we meant we champion diversity and welcome individuality, and that we're working toward an equitable workplace. So having codified that in our values, which to me are the guideposts by which we ask our employees to live and work, basically, we have to then act on that, and we have to bring that spirit. And I'll say cancel culture in some ways just makes me incredibly sad, because it feels very mean-spirited, and it feels almost immature in some ways. But this is the world, and people out there exercising their voice, right? They're exercising their right to speak up when they see something that doesn't work for them, or just doesn't sit right. And so we have to be mindful of it. But to my mind, if you have that compass of your values and what your company believes in, then you do have an obligation to say something. And I think we certainly draw the line at political statements that we make from a place of being about politics. But by the same token, we were very vocal around things like Black Lives Matter, which to me transcend politics. That's about humanity. Totally. And it's very different kettle of fish, if you will.
100%. Lisa, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I think these two nailed it. This is work we do with our customers every single day, is helping them understand, listen, if you have values and purpose that you are passionate to the core about, there are going to be people who are into it right now and they're going to applaud, and there are going to be people who are not into it, and maybe they say nothing, or maybe they don't engage with you, or maybe they come after you. I mean, cancel culture you know, going back to face masks, the boycott Costco campaign that happened as soon as Costco put face mask policies in place. It is just going to happen. But I guess the recommendation that I would have is don't blindly, the CMO of Qualcomm, we had a conversation not long ago, and he said, you know, my main thing is I'm walking into a minefield. If you're being outspoken about your purpose, if you are, you know, backing action or leading action on your purpose, you are walking into a minefield because there are going to be people who aren't happy about it. Know the minefield that you're walking into. And this is about the listening and understanding. And this is where you need to listen and understand the customer base that you care about. What do they care about? How do they talk about this? What is the action they want to see? And then know who is not going to be happy about this. And as a marketing team, this is about being prepared for that. And maybe it just means you're just watching and listening over there, but don't walk blindly into that minefield. But just like Leela's saying and Barbara said, you know, we work with companies, Levi's and Bumble, and these companies that have lived their purpose and lived their values for years. And this is what they're dealing with every single day. And I think it is, cancel culture is not going to go away. I think it's just about having confidence in your values and knowing you're connecting with the right group.
I think
Yeah,
that's
one other
fantastic thing. Go ahead, Leela.
Sorry, one other add to all of that. I see a question around transparency. Is I think it's important for us to embrace that even a brand that's been trying to live its values is not going to have done it perfectly, right? And I think we had, I'll give one example. So we at SurveyMonkey, we recently rolled out a vendor diversity survey template and encouraged other organizations to join us in having that dialogue with our suppliers to understand their approach to diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and you know how you know just their composition, but also just with the commitments that they were making. So we were very proud to roll that out with brands like Zoom and Slack and Intuit and so forth. Our CEO was shared it on social, and then someone out there took us to task because they looked at the composition of the leadership teams of the companies involved and pointed out that none of the companies involved, SurveyMonkey included, at the senior leadership level, is as diverse as we would like. So difficult conversation to have, but I think what Xander, our CEO, could do was respond to that and say, you know what, we're right, you're right. We do have 2 Black women on our board, which is a tops down indication of how much we care about this, but we still have a lot of work to do at the senior leadership level, and we're committed to doing that. So it was an example where we're not perfect. No, I don't think any organization out there is perfect. But I would encourage, so long as you are committed to walking the talk and backing up your words with action, I would encourage brands to be more transparent about where they are in their journeys, because I think consumers are looking for authenticity. They're looking for the real story. They're not necessarily looking for perfection, but they want to know that you care and that you're aligned with their worldview.
And they can sniff out the BS. I mean, I think that has become more we've become so much more aware of that than ever before, especially since we are now in, digital as like one of the only channels at this point. So I think to your point, to everyone's point, it's stand for something, show up in those values, and hold yourself accountable to that. And I think to your point, Leela, it's not about perfection, it's about moving the needle. And I think everyone on this call and your organizations are doing such a fantastic job of that. And actually, Ali Shah had an additional question about metrics. So I would love to hear your response to how are you linking marketing and brand objectives with tangible ESG metrics to provide substance to marketing claims? So what is it that your organizations are doing to back it up? It's a big question. And I think I will start with Barbara, because I think this is part of your day-to-day. I think you probably can answer this the easiest out of everyone.
Oh, I don't know how easy it is. Well, because
not an easy question for sure.
Well, but to your point, I think measurement, again, when we are just a slightly different kind of brand. You know, we're not a CPG, we're not retail, we're not a publicly traded company. So as a social mission organization, along with our values is we can lean on easily more than a decade under a very, very bright CEO who has a woman who has brought us into so much from an innovation standpoint, relying on good measures around a dashboard, which, to be honest with you, a lot of nonprofits have sort of come a little late to that, not AARP. So I think that we remain committed to a lot of the same measures because they are an expression of the value we deliver. So we measure things like how many lives are we impacting through our advocacy. And when we are successful with advocacy campaigns, you know, you all read the papers, you read the news. Nursing homes right now, it's a very big issue. And so if AARP isn't going to step in and create change in how nursing home residents, the staff, the families are living through COVID, then who is going to? So all the measures are still there. It's how we are delivering. And back to this notion of pivoting, we count on engagement with our information. Well, now it's mostly information around COVID and the financial and the health. So I think that a lot of the things that we have become accustomed to measuring have remained the same. It's how we are getting there through listening to our consumer, through recognizing also how the consumer sentiment has in fact changed over the last 6 months, and trying to be as responsive as we can to where the consumer is, keeping the consumer in the middle, and but not sort of deviating or straying from the very things that we know are important. We measure what is important. Those things have remained consistent. It's how we're getting there that is really probably more the variable for us now.
Fair. Leela, Lisa, do you have any new measurements you've put in place to track these?
So less on the marketing side, I would say. So I think I think it's a great question, because I think we probably still need to think about that. I mean, one thing I am putting more thought into these days is certainly the types of story that we are telling and elevating, because I think you know, that is everything, right? Our jobs are storytellers in chief, and we have the power to direct the narrative in whichever direction we like. So there's that. From a measurement and metric standpoint, I think more internally about the things that we commit to as an organization. So, you know, we've long tracked, had different ways of measuring employee engagement. Today we use a survey that we run periodically with CNBC, which is called the Workforce Happiness Index, which any organization can run just to see how they stack up against other companies out there. And we've made the commitment to cut those metrics by, for example, to make sure that we understand how underrepresented minorities are voting, or you know, the feedback that they're giving us relative to other populations within the workforce. So that's one example of how we're just making sure that we look at the metrics to really call out that aspect of things. Also looking at metrics by different levels within the organization, because sometimes when you look at the averages, you can pat yourself on the back and say, hey, our scores look pretty decent. But when you start to make different cuts of the data and understand how different populations are feeling, then sometimes you learn a different story, and you can really zero in on places where you can make some improvements. So I think I've seen a much bigger commitment internally to taking a real hard look at the data to make sure we're moving in the right direction.
It's critical. And to that point, Mark Hanna asks, there have been a lot of conversations around social justice and equality in the past few months. How transparent do you recommend a company communicate on this? I think, Lisa, you're probably the right person to answer this question, since you're out there listening to consumer sentiment around multiple issues, but certainly the issue of social justice and equality.
I mean, I think it's some of the things that we've talked about already. If you have already been living a purpose around social justice, I think you stay the course. And maybe you even get louder. I think if it's something that you care about and maybe your business feels like you haven't been loud enough about, I think you go back to exactly what Leela said, and you come out with a statement. And maybe part of that statement is, we're coming out for the first time on this topic, and this is our time to come out on this topic. And we recognize we have work to do, and here is our plan of action. So there's probably, I guess I'm saying, not one answer for everyone, but you do have to you have to live it, and you have to think multiple touch points. I mean, one example, we've been doing some research on, we go really deep, the Chinese labor issues with the Uyghurs in China. That is connected to people we see coming after LeBron James. LeBron James is out front, has been very outspoken about social justice, racial justice issues for many years. That has been his platform. He is backed by Nike, who happens to use manufacturing in China. People are coming after LeBron because of that and contesting his platform, which he's not backing down, and good for him because he's had that platform for many years. But I think you have to think about what are the dots that people are going to connect, and how do you make sure either you're shoring up those things if you're going to get louder than you've already been, or as you're putting a plan of action in place, how do you make sure that plan of action is really thoughtful?
Absolutely. And a follow-up to that, Molly Dean asks, how do I even start that conversation? How do I start the conversation about purpose at a company that does not necessarily foundationally have a purpose-driven plan? It's open to anyone. This is, we kind of talked about the macro of it. This is on the micro. This is like the, how do you take that first baby step into this conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Molly. I mean, I'm not saying this because I just work at SurveyMonkey, but you could start with surveying your employees to find out how much that matters. I'll say that because, and let me tell you the true story, right? As I said, we declared that we revised our mission and basically articulated a vision, I think for the first time in the company history, back in March. And research and feedback from our employees informed the decision of whether we needed a vision or not. Right, so we ran some workshops with our director level employees, and one of the questions was, here's what a mission, here's how we think about a mission, here's how we think about a vision, here's our mission today. Do you think we need a vision? Do you think we need that purpose? And the answer was resoundingly yes. I think 74% of our directors said, yeah, we absolutely would benefit from having clearer articulation of our why. And so if you were able to take to your leaders some proof points from your company that show that your employees are hungry for that sense of purpose, that sense of why they exist, why their work matters, then that might help to open up the dialogue around investing the time and the resources into defining it and then rolling it out.
And can I add to that?
Please,
I totally agree with everything that Leela just said. I think obviously it's sort of like start with the family. But I think there's another potentially interesting question to ask, which is, we may not be articulating our purpose, but the absence of our articulation of our purpose means that other people, our customers, our stockholders, our partners, our vendors, they're filling in the blank. They're answering the question on what our purpose is. And if what they're getting to is, well, I guess your purpose is to make money, then you're missing this massive opportunity to own what the answer to that question is. You're ceding that ground to everybody else. And so maybe that is a way to, whether it's provocative or not, maybe that's a way to help people recognize that if we're not answering the question, it doesn't mean that others aren't answering the question. And we're allowing them to, because we aren't owning the why, we're letting them answer the why. And absent anything else, they may be coming down to something that is not how we would answer it.
Totally. Lisa, you seemed really excited by that response.
No, I mean, Barbara, you nailed it. And, and the flip side may be, maybe there are things we should build from in what they're saying. The way that we think about the internet, we think about it in factions. So like the demography of the internet is not age, location, zip code. The demography of the internet is, what are we passionately aligned on? Where do we have aligned ideologies? Where do we have aligned interests? Where do we have aligned passions? And we try and break that up into groups that are contextualized, mommy bloggers, Etsy crafters, and trying to understand, what do those people care about, especially in relation to a brand and a brand's values? And what is the cultural intelligence around that? Not just
so important,
what do they say and what are words that they use, but how do they feel about this? What is the tone of those words? When they say, you could look at, they use the word cancel. Are they saying cancel my brand? Or are they saying, I'm so proud that so-and-so is canceling hate, right? So don't just understand the words they use, but understand the context that they use them within. And especially when that aligns with passions, praise, criticism against us, know the factions and the parts of the internet that you care about, and coupling that with things like what SurveyMonkey can do is an amazing way to get a handle on just how does my customer base that I care about already talk about me? Or if I have been doing work to put my purpose out there, does it feel like it's still aligned, or does that seem like that needs to be evolved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that contextualization is so absolutely critical. Well, gosh, we've only got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to run through the questions and make sure we've answered what people need today. And thank you for everyone that showed up on this call. Your questions are fantastic. And of course, this panel is unreal. I'm so honored to be a part of it. Okay, so continuing down the questions. Have you seen growth in purpose-driven marketing at industry levels? Best examples of your respective roles. So when we did our kind of pre-call, we talked about some case studies. I would love to hear your perspective on the growth that you're seeing as it relates to purpose-driven marketing.
Yeah,
Probably Leela can answer that one best.
Yeah, I've got a couple of examples come to mind, and I think it stems back to the comment I made around CMOs congregating earlier in the crisis to just trade notes. And I think certainly in Silicon Valley and beyond, there was a sense of sort of common purpose and common commitment across organizations. So we joined a coalition or an initiative that GoDaddy led that was really around uniting to help small businesses to really try and get through the pandemic. And so we were, I think, a bunch of different technology companies contributed resources and expertise and discounts and all sorts of special considerations to help small businesses try and survive and thrive in really, really tough times. So, you know, that's one example. I feel like there was a lot of discussion around small businesses specifically and how can we help them, because they're so important to society and to the world.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We
work with again, we work with Levi's, and I think you can look at them as a beacon for purpose and living purpose. They've had a campaign that different campaigns that they've run for many years, basically making time for their employees to vote. They've also created coalitions. I think there's a lot of coalition creation right now, and it's really awesome around hate, around all sorts of things, and I love it. But I think Levi's is another one that they've really led the way. They've created whole marketing campaigns around making time for employees to vote. And it's something that they live with their team. And then I think it was with Lyft and maybe Dick's Sporting Goods and a number of others. They came together to promote that and try and pressure other businesses to do the same. And I think that's just living your purpose to the core, from how you treat your employees, like you said, Leela, from how you treat your employees to the marketing campaigns that you back.
Yeah.
I would just add one thing, which is a little bit different than the specific question. But as I was listening to Lisa and Leela, I think about almost like a new generation of rock stars that we have, like Jose Andres, and how we've got this sort of elevated sense now, or different sense of who we really want to see, who we wish we could meet, who we wish we could work with, you know, finding ways to emulate them. They've become our role models. And I think that's such a great outcome. If, you know, as we start to look at some of the outcomes of some of this, I just think that, and it's so, and again, it's so genuine. This is who he is. It's just, he's become somebody that we all, I think, I'll speak for myself, wish we could be more like. And maybe that's a slightly different way of looking at part of what you're asking.
I think it's a really positive take. I actually made sandwiches with Jose Andres in Puerto Rico immediately following the hurricanes and all of the tragedy down there. It was pretty amazing. He's magical. We have a couple questions that are a little on the negative side, and I want to make sure that we address that as well, because we've been coming at this from a more positive perspective. But it seems like there's a couple of questions from people who are in companies who are not showing up in the way that they'd like for them to, in terms of inclusion and equal treatment. So what would your advice be to companies who have employees that are not feeling like their voices are being heard, and or how can emerging brands navigate a toxic culture? And then I want to end on something positive after that, but I want to make sure we've got quite a few questions around that.
That's a tough one. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the reality is the internet is a megaphone for whatever you want to say. And so we are seeing, I think we, you know, gosh, if you can remember back to a time where Me Too was the thing we were talking about, and just the outpouring of stories of real, you know, kind of the real talk around what was really going on inside establishments and in certain industries and so forth. So I think employees, it's a bold move, but employees do have the right to speak up and to exercise their voice. You know, I think you can, it's hard to say vote with your feet in an economy like this. I appreciate, because I know, you know, it's unemployment is at record levels and people are struggling, but if you have a choice of employment, then that's another way that you can vote. I mean, I will say for myself that I've become increasingly attuned over the years to the culture in organization, and my primary consideration these days is either is this a culture that I would be proud to contribute to, or at a leadership level, is this a culture that I feel I can influence, that has the right intentions, knows it has work to do, and where I think I can be someone who can help move the needle. So if you have that opportunity to, you know, there are other employers out there who I think are, you know, hopefully more worthy of your time and your talents.
100%. And the last question I think we're going to get to today, we've got quite a few questions, both in the chat and in the QA, about kind of foundational marketing, new launches, new startups, and advice around that. So I want to do just kind of quick fire around the room. What is the one piece of advice you wish you had known now when you started your career in marketing? And I will start with Barbara.
Oh, I knew you were going to say me. Wow, what is the one piece of advice I wish I had known when I started my career? I think I would say that it is accept, understand, and embrace all the different things that go into this kind of crazy career. You know, I specifically chose not to go into a technology or engineering where I make widgets and I make things and then I hope that they work. There isn't really ever one just right answer. And to be open to the different options, get lots of different input, which I'll be honest was something that I had to learn how to do, was be very intentional about getting lots of good input, learning how to listen better, and I always have a very open mind, and I do consider myself to be energetic and creative and all of those things, but sometimes it can be too easy to sort of close off.
Don't be myopic.
Some of the different things that you're hearing, and then you tend not to hear them. So, you know, listen, get lots of different input, be ready to make mistakes, and then course correct quickly. That probably sounds like a Hallmark card version of an answer, and I really don't want that to be, but I do actually think there's something very real in there. And as I think personally about the question, I do wish I could go back to that person and say, you know, give yourself a chance, bring others in, accept the mistakes, move on, and make it better.
Fantastic. Leela?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer would come down to focus at that very early stage, right? You got to know your customer. You got to know who you're delivering value to. You have to know your North Star metric. What are you trying to move the needle on when you do anything? Because you will kill yourself if you try and boil the ocean. And you have to ruthlessly prioritize. And I think back to my early days at LinkedIn, going from 500 to 6,500 employees. And I think back to taking a startup from Series A to Series C rather. And we had to focus, right? And just be prepared to say no to things. So just try and narrow your focus so that you can have more impact by doing less.
Fantastic. And finally, Lisa.
I'm going to take that reminder for myself today, Leela. Thank you.
Me too, actually. Me too.
Yeah, everybody. I'd mimic what Barbara said. Listen more, talk less. You know, I certainly thought I knew everything and wanted to get out there and make my mark. And now I actually value listening more than being that person. And I've been at a lot of early stage businesses. You know, I've learned from every single one of the failures. So don't be afraid to fail. You do not, everything does not have to be a success. And if it is, you're probably not focused on the right things.
And yeah, learn from that failure.
Yep.
Yes.
So valuable.
There's no such thing as failure. They're just lessons. Thank you so much to the panel. You guys have been fantastic. And thank you to the audience for tuning in, showing up, and asking really great questions that, that really challenged us today. We're going to add a link in the chat box for the upcoming November conference. I will be speaking as well, so you'll have to show up and see. And I think some of the other panelists will be there as well. And with that, Jasmine, I will pass it back to you. Thank you guys so much for showing up today.
And thank you so much. I think that last question, I mean, I honestly feel personally inspired. So I hope the rest of the audience feel the same. And on that note, isn't it just wonderful to have an all-women panel? It's so amazing to have all of these speakers to be inspired by and to learn from and to come together to share these insights. So I really appreciate us all coming together and for you to put in the time, Leela, Lisa, Barbara, and of course, Laurel too. And we are all going to be at Strategic Marketing USA, so that's really exciting. Not far away now, feels very close for me in particular, but everything's coming together. We have some marvelous speakers. Honestly, really the most senior speaker lineup that we've ever had before. We have people from CMOs and SVPs from AT&T, of course, SurveyMonkey. We also have AARP's CMO as well as Barbara, and a wide range of cross-industry leaders, really, you name it, they'll probably be there. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time. And we'll send around the recordings as well following the conference in about 24 hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Laurel. Great job, Laurel.
Guys.
Thank you, Laurel.